This talk was given by Roshi Martin, guiding teacher of the Endless Path Zendo, a lay Buddhist community in Rochester, New York. Join our practice, in person or online, at endlesspathzendo.org.
So today is Saturday, June 28th, 2025, and today we will resume with the autobiography of Han-shan, the Ming Dynasty Zen master, whose autobiography is such a really lively and profound piece of work, really unusual, very touching, as well as touching on some terrific a sense of what Zen culture, Zen life was really about. And it has, it's so interesting when you look at the life of, this is around 1500 or so, early 1600s, China. China, in some ways, seems to me so much closer to the U.S. than Japan. Japan is a very tight, it's a small place and people are really packed up really against each other. China is vast, just vast, and spaciousness in the character of the Chinese masters really in some ways seems much more familiar, less stiff, less, I don't know what the word would, ritualized perhaps, than the Japanese. We'll pick up where we left off in his 47th year. The very end of that goes like this. Then for 40 days and nights, Master Da Guan and I sat facing each other as if we were united in one state of samadhi. This was the most beautiful time of my life. This was the most beautiful time of my life. My 48th year, 1593-4. That year, a severe famine in Shandong province caused many people to starve to death. Tragedies of this world and how long and how hard it's been to put a social safety net in place. How terribly sad there are people even these days who look at dismantling the social safety net, or I can't imagine what kind of selfish reasons. But 1593-4, there was a famine. Many people starved to death. The streets were filled with the dead. Near our mountain, there were many hungry people. The monastery was up on a mountain, which is pretty typical of how things were in China. In fact, teachers were named after the mountain their place was on. We fed them with our temple's provisions, and after our supplies were exhausted, I went by boat to Liaodong to buy more staples. Not a single person on our side of the mountain died of starvation. So he didn't just continue doing Zazen for the sake of all beings. He got up and he did what he could to alleviate, quite literally, the suffering of ordinary people around him. It didn't matter if they were practicing or not practicing. It didn't matter if they were Buddhists or Taoists or pagans or barbarians. They needed food. He did what he could. He didn't say, I'm busy doing Zazen. The 49th year, 1594-5. That spring, in the third month, Viceroy Zheng Kun-ya of Shandong visited me. He had many questions about the Dharma, which I happily answered. In the 10th month, for the winter solstice festival, I went to the capital to extend holiday greetings to the Empress Mother. I accepted an invitation to stay on several months for the New Year's celebrations and also to lecture on Buddhist precepts at Chishu Temple. By this time, the Empress Mother had amassed a considerable sum of money for the Bao'an Temple rebuilding project. I asked her when the reconstruction would commence. Owing to a political crisis which had been created by the Japanese invasion of Korea, Chinese troops were being mobilized, and under these circumstances she had to defer any decisions about the temple project. 50th year, 1595-6. This was not a good year. In the spring, no sooner had I returned from the capital to my seaside temple than I was arrested on a variety of charges. We will all meet with varying degrees of injustice sorrow, even malice perhaps in our lives. This is the human condition. This is planet Earth, a saha, a tolerable or bearable world. It's not because, oh, well, I'm practicing, everything is just going to go beautifully. No, but it will give us the ability to deal as beautifully as we can with the things that come our way. Karma being karma, who knows what will ripen to any of us, given the endlessness of time and all the things we've done, and who knows how many past lifetimes that will ripen, both good and not so good in this life. First of all, owing mostly to Taoist intrigue, the Empress Mother's devotion to Buddhism and her kind attentions to me were not entirely appreciated by the Emperor. I think that's putting it probably mildly. Not entirely appreciated by the Emperor and by some other ranking members of the imperial court. Many courtiers resented Her Majesty's gift to me of the Tripitaka and a request that other ladies of the court donate the money to build a suitable temple to house it. They also resented that while others had paid for the temple, she personally chose to rename it Ha-Yin, a renaming which seemed to give imperial recognition to the Buddhist claim of ownership. Then, too, the old misunderstanding about the Moksha Parishad had never really fully been resolved. Many officials still thought that I had disobeyed an imperial order. Complicating this, these court officials also detested the Empress Mother's envoy, the one who had delivered both the Tripitaka and the money, which had been donated to build the temple to house it. Of this money, I had used only 700 gold coins on the construction project and had asked the envoy to distribute the remainder of the gift to those who were suffering from the famine. And he had done so, but at the instigation of several Taoist functionaries and those resentful court officials, charges of having misused the entire sum were brought against the hated envoy and me. My Bao-en rebuilding plan also aroused such or much enmity. Court members, especially those who were not Buddhists, did not see why they should suffer even a small reduction in the sumptuousness of their meals just to satisfy my sentimental fondness for an old temple that Her Majesty could have been persuaded to finance. My expensive whim suggested that I had undue influence in the imperial court. Their irritation extended even to the court administrator, who oversaw the collection of the money saved from the daily food budget. Remember, he had said, well, if we just take a little bit from the daily food budget on a regular basis, within 3 years we'd have enough money to rebuild this very important old temple. And the Empress had said, gee, that's a good idea. We don't have to be quite so lavish in our meals. Well, people resented that, especially high-placed people resented any infringement on the luxury or luxuriousness of their lives. We see the same things being played out right now. People who have more money than they could ever spend want to cut away social safety networks so they can have more. I mean, how pitiful is that? I mean, it's just stunning, isn't it? When you think of what our own real human nature, a deep sense of empathy and of not separation from all things, suggests about how to live simply and well. Unbelievable. In any case, it was going on then, it was going on before then, it's going on now. It'll continue to go on until Maitreya comes, billions of years in the future, so it's said. In any case, so the administrator, too, was charged with fiscal irresponsibility. Most serious of all, however, was the old charge that I had illegally seized Taoist property at Donghai Mountain. When the Taoists of the area had rioted, remember he calmed that riot and saved the Taoists who were being threatened by the military so skillfully and creatively. In any case, when the Taoists had rioted, the prefect had been able to disperse their bodies, but neither he nor I had been able to disperse their enmity. So even though he helped them, their enmity was still present. The Taoists continued to press their grievance against me, and when they and the disgruntled court officials became allies, isn't that how it happens? People get enraged about certain issues and join up with people who may have very different views, but that enragement is such a self-interested rage, is such a, it's like pushing a button, and there it is. And we get an emotional charge, a real adrenaline rush. We can forget all our troubles and worries and just, give it to the other person. Hurt them somehow. That makes us feel better. But again, sad reality of human emotion. In any case, that's what was going on. Their petty grievance took on imperial dimensions. So a formal complaint replete with exaggerations and false accusations was drawn up against me and presented to the emperor by an agent of theirs who for this purpose, falsely presented himself as a Taoist priest. God, this is like, it sounds so familiar. We could read this in the New York Times today. I mean, it's just kind of uncanny. It was an effective piece of deception. The emperor, angered and indignant, immediately gave the arrest order. Upon learning of my misfortune, my friends and disciples were extremely upset, and I naturally tried to console them. I have been here with you for 12 years. Think of what has been accomplished during this time. People who wandered aimlessly without any moral guidance now walk strong and straight on a sacred Buddhist path. I have heard little children sweetly chant the Buddha's name. What do I have to regret? And then, recalling my old vow to rebuild Bao'an Temple, I corrected myself. That Bao'an Temple is not likely to be restored, is my only real regret. At the capital, the Bureau of Pacification was ordered to interrogate me. The Bureau of Pacification sounds suspiciously like something we would have again today, something out of Orwell's 1984, the Bureau of Pacification. It's a chilling title, isn't it? And of course, interrogation probably meant some form of torture. Interrogation is a loaded word. Before being formally indicted on all counts, I was beaten, there you go, and relentlessly questioned about the Empress Mother's donations to various Buddhist monasteries, donations which, according to my accusers, totaled several 100,000 gold coins. So the injustice of this, the malice of this, it's pretty astonishing, and yet it's so terribly familiar. I refused to say anything that might compromise Her Majesty's devotion to Buddhism. And as to the donation which the court ladies had made, I fortunately was able to produce court records which showed exactly how and where the money had been spent. The charge of a misappropriation of funds was then dropped. I was further prodded to betray the Empress Mother by saying that she had not only sanctioned my illegal acquisition of Taoist property at Donghai, but had actually encouraged it when she had requested that money be donated to construct a new Buddhist temple on an old Taoist site. I related to the court the historical research of the area which I had done when I first arrived at Donghai. I contended that the property had been originally Buddhist, that Taoists had illegally obtained title to it by forging the emperor's signature, that subsequently Buddhist authorities had successfully petitioned for its return, and that in any case this temple site had long been abandoned when I arrived. These, I insisted, were assurances I had given Her Majesty. I presented my views with such conviction that the emperor readily understood how the Empress Mother would have accepted my version of the facts without any doubt as to their accuracy. He and the Empress Mother were completely reconciled. I was devoted to both their majesties, And the one consolation I was able to derive from my ordeal was that I had not succumbed to the torture and allowed myself to become an instrument of familial dissension. But it was the Taoist version of the facts that the emperor chose to accept, and I was found guilty of illegally building temples at Donghai. Accordingly, I was jailed in Leizhou. This was in the 3rd month of the year. Throughout my trial, all of the temples in the capital continuously recited sutras for me and held kshamayati ceremonies which invoked divine patience and forgiveness. Some monks even offered the sacrifice of letting incense sticks burn down on their arms, while they repeated mantras and prayers for my safety. Jin Wu, the son of official Zheng Fanji of Anshu, whom I had never met, held a banquet for the purpose of rallying support of nobles and gentry. This is the thing, of course, without the rule of law, it all becomes the whim of those with power. And this is such an important thing, that democracies are founded on the rule of law, not on the whim of those in power. One of the great acts of the founding of the United States was when George Washington, at the end, when he had beaten the British forces and was offered essentially becoming the Emperor of the United States, turned down any position of power to return to ordinary civilian life. He turned down power. This was really the founding of the vision of what civilian life in the United States would be about. Doing what needed to be done for the welfare of all and not taking personal gain from it. It's a very noble vision. We should be proud of what our country has done for the last several hundred years. In any case, with tears in his eyes, he told them of my innocence. His audience expressed much regret for my suffering and for the damage that was being done to the Buddhist Dharma. In this, they reflected the true attitude of the people towards the Dharma at that time. For 8 months, I remained in prison. During this time, only Hanshan was permitted to bring me food. At that time, prisons did not provide comforts, which included food. You had to have your own people who would bring you food. Otherwise, you starved to death in prison. And only one person at that time was allowed to bring him food. That winter, in the 10th month, I was deported to the south. Many people, including officials, who dressed as ordinary citizens, accompanied me to the river bank. My attendant, Hanshan, and 2 or 3 other monks followed me. In the 11th month, I arrived in Nanjing. After saying goodbye to my mother, I composed a literary work entitled Mother and Son. When I departed, I took my orphaned nephew with me. I recalled that earlier, when Master Daguan and I had stayed together on the mountain of the Stone Sutras. Remember when it was a thing where the sutras were carved on 800 stone tablets and hidden away. And then at one point they emitted light, and they were dug out again and refound. So when we'd stayed together on the mountain of the Stone Sutras, he had said, commenting on the decline of the Chan sect, that's Zen, that Kaoji, that's Nanhua Shi, the source of Chan, might also be deteriorating. We had then decided to go there to revive the monastery, and he had in fact gone ahead and was waiting for me to join him at Kungshan. When I was arrested, he was staying at Chongqi. When Master Daguan heard of my arrest, he was stunned. Then he sadly noted, if Master Han-shan is gone, our vow to revive Gaoqi, which was the temple of the 6th patriarch, so it was a very important Zen site, which he had vowed to rebuild. It had fallen into, basically it had been turned into a shambles. Animals were being butchered there and sold in meat markets, and the temple was in complete foulness and disarray. Nevertheless, he continued on to the monastery before returning to Laocheng. When he learned that I would be arriving in Nanjing, he went there to wait for me. We were able to spend time together talking in a temple by the river bank. He wanted to go to the capital to plead my case for me, but I discouraged him from doing this. As a son obeys his father, I obey his majesty. What is the difference between families and governments? This sentence is my fate, and I accept it. Please, I begged, do not do or say anything in my defense. Interesting. Before we parted, he grasped my arm and said, when I heard that you were arrested at Tianqi, I made vows before the Buddha shrine to recite the Lotus Sutra 100 times for your safety. I prayed with all my heart that you would be delivered from harm. I pray now that you will have no further trouble. I humbly thanked him. He later wrote to me, sending me a copy of his composition, The Expulsion of a Guest. My 51st year, 1596-7. In the first month, still in the state of banishment, I crossed Wenjiang River and visited Imperial Counselor Zhu. Upasaka, that means layperson, lay practitioner, Wang Jinhai of Luling came to the boat to pay his respects and to ask me to write a commentary on the Lankavatara Sutra, which was supposedly a favorite of Bodhidharma's. In the second month, I went up to the peak of Yu Mountain to see the place where Wei Ming attempted to seize the sixth patriarch's robe. That's an incident which we take up, I think, as the 23rd case of the Gateless Barrier. And the story is the sixth patriarch, who was said to be illiterate, for 3 years was pounding rice in the temple of the fifth patriarch, and then there was the competition of the verse. The head monk put up a verse which was something about keeping the mirror clean, wiping the dust away, and so you will get better and better in realization, essentially. And the illiterate sixth, soon-to-be sixth patriarch, Wei Neng, Eka in Ino in Japanese, had that read to him because he didn't know what it was. Supposedly he was illiterate, and then had a temple boy write his verse up on the wall, which was something like, there is no mirror, there's no dust, there's no place for dust to alight, there's nothing to wipe clean, it's basically been empty from the beginning. And the fifth patriarch said, he too doesn't have it, and wiped it out with his shoe. However, he then called the guy who had been pounding rice for 3 years, not even sitting in the zendo. He was so poverty-stricken and illiterate, they didn't want him around, called him in and transmitted the Dharma to him. And then he set out with the robe and the bowl. Of course, the monks in the monastery were infuriated. This illiterate guy who's just been pounding rice has been transmitted the Dharma? And one of the monks was an ex-general, really ferocious in character. So he goes running after him to basically beat him up, take the robe and the bowl and bring it back where it belonged. And he encounters the sixth patriarch very kindly, even though destruction is heading his way. He simply says, what's the original mind of Monk Ming? That was the ex-general. And it transforms the guy completely, and it's quite an interesting story, how he then recognizes the sixth patriarch as his actual teacher. And the sixth patriarch sends him back to the monastery to work with the community, and the fifth patriarch should be his teacher. It's a very humble, very beautiful story. In any case, we went up to the peak of Yu Mountain to see the place where Wei Ming, that's that ex-general, attempted to seize the sixth patriarch's robe, also the robe in the bowl, supposedly which had belonged to Bodhidharma, which is then passed on through the first six patriarchs in China, and after that it's gone. The robe and the bowl as a literal objects disappear from the narrative. In any case, in memory of this event, I wrote these 2 lines. And when you passed this way before, beloved journeyman, one who followed showed you his immortal face. What is the original face of Monk Ming? Think neither good nor evil. Right now, what's your original face? That was the challenge that this supposedly illiterate sixth patriarch put before this general who was coming after him to give him what for. It says, one who followed showed you his immortal face. Shall mine be seen so clearly? A question for all of us. Should mine be seen so clearly? What, noble ones, is your original face? Think neither good nor evil. Right now, what is the original face of your honored self? This sight was truly inspirational and well worth seeing. Well, that's one of the beauties of pilgrimage, to go to places where such things actually happened. This is a very ancient human tradition, to go to places where such powerful things beyond our habitual self-centeredness actually occurred. It aligns us with that power in ourselves. The sight was truly inspirational and well worth seeing, but the path to it was far too rugged for travelers. I therefore instructed one of my attendants to set up a booth to offer free tea to visitors, and I encouraged local Buddhists to work on the road and to persuade each visitor to also contribute a little help. Within a few years, the path to the site was smooth and safe. So he turned this into an opportunity to create communal practice. We don't just practice for ourselves, to get something for me, myself, and I. We work to benefit the community, which includes the world, which includes forests, mountains, rivers, trees, animals, people, and ourselves. We do the best we can with that, and he was making use of the opportunities that he saw to encourage that kind of communal responsibility. When I arrived at Shaoyang, I went immediately to the mountain to pay reverence to the sixth patriarch. I drank the water of Kaoji and wrote the following gata. One drop of Kaoji's water was enough to make the ocean waves lash at the sky and change timid fish to dragons. The spring is clogged, the well is dry. In the calm sea, no infant dragons stir. It's a sad commentary. He's saying we've got to rebuild that. Timid fish become dragons. In Zen, the image is of the carp, the fish, leaping up against the flow of the waterfall, and at the top, if it reaches that, becomes the dragon it has always truly been, rather than a timid little fish. You see that in the Enlightenment story of Rinzai. He was a very humble, sensitive, learned monk, actually, and he kept going to Wangbo, the teacher, Obaku, of the monastery he was in, and asked what was the meaning of the Buddha Dharma, and what is the clearly manifested essence of the Buddha Dharma. And he got hit with a stick. And he went again. Very naive, very sensitive young monk, young practitioner. What is the essence of the Buddha Dharma? He gets hit again. He's kind of thinking of giving up, and the head monk says, go again and try again. He goes again, he gets hit again. So he gives up. He's given advice to go to this other teacher. He goes to the other teacher and starts complaining, crying really, about what rough treatment he had received, and he doesn't understand what he had whether he did any wrong or why he got hit. And the other teacher says, "Oh, Wangpo was so grandmotherly to you, trying to help you so much." And suddenly, Rinzai, suddenly has deep awakening with this. He's been struggling with this for quite some time and was really in pain about it. It wasn't a trivial question to him, this highest meaning of the Buddha Dharma. He suddenly gets it, and he exclaims there wasn't much to Wangpo's Buddhism after all. And then he becomes a complete firebrand So it's like that. The carp, timid little fish, became a great dragon. And of course, he was always still quite a sensitive, insightful. It wasn't like he was like a steamroller, some kind of violent character, but he was ferocious in his Dharma talks and his interactions with those who came to him. And yet, I've mentioned this before, when Rose and I and Sunyana Roshi and her communities were on pilgrimage in 2006 to Japan. We went to Linchi's temple, and there I was astonished to see something no books had ever revealed, where he gave his Dharma talks, his teishos. Behind him was like a 30-foot high, just huge, 1,000-armed Avalokiteshvara, painted red, blue, gold, almost like Tibetan looking. So he gave this fire-eating, ferocious, dragon-like presentations before an image of the uttermost compassion. And it was really an insight into where Linchi was coming from. When you look at him on the page, he seems terrifying. But when you realize the atmosphere he was speaking from, he was so compassionately trying to help people remove, cut away, kill the self-centeredness that we're all habituated to really free them to experience what he had experienced in moving from being a timid little fish to a fire-breathing dragon. There's that sense of compassion there. It's not, Zen can be stereotyped into something very harsh and very narrow, but it's not at all. It's the way of the Bodhisattva brought to life. It's about actualizing Bodhisattva vows to really grow up. And that's the other aspect of the dragon. It's a grown-up fish. That's all. So, the sixth patriarch's temple was nearly deserted and close to ruin, which is why he wrote that verse. Deeply saddened, I left for Guangzhou. When I arrived, I put on prisoner's garb and bonds and presented myself to the military general, who untied my cords and invited me to a feast at Haizhu Temple. At that time, Imperial Counselor Zhu Haimen was lecturing on Yanming metaphysics. When he heard of my arrival, he called on me, bringing a few dozen of his followers along. He began a discussion by referring to the saying, "One cannot realize the truth until one understands the condition of day and night." A Taoist elder who was sitting among them responded, "The condition is consciousness," he said, "and day and night are waking and sleeping. The same consciousness that functions during our daylight actions functions during the night in our dream actions." The audience showed its approval. Counselor Zhu then turned to me. Venerable old Chan master, he was like 52 or 51 at this time or something? Venerable old Chan master. Whoa, 51 seems like a kid these days, but I don't know. Venerable old Chan master, he said, though everyone else seems to be satisfied with this interpretation, I am not. Please give us your opinion. What is the source of the quotation? I asked. It is from the Book of Changes, he answered, reciting a few additional sentences. That's the I Ching. These words are a wise man's advice to men that they should transcend samsara and get beyond birth and death, I said. The counselor applauded. Only this old master's interpretation accords with the text. The meaning is now clear. They should transcend samsara and get beyond birth and death. But his followers didn't understand and asked for further explanation. So, day and night excuse me, are the illusion called birth and death, the counselor explained. Not until one is delivered from the conditions of this illusion can one experience reality. What is reality? If we approach it from the foundation of our limited thoughts, we don't see reality. We see our thought-created version of it. There's a line, a verse in the Gateless Barrier, because it is so clear. It takes so long to realize. It's so clear means it's there before even a single thought begins to arise. And we spend our time climbing a ladder of thoughts to get to something called truth. But the silly truth is, the truth is there. It's what the ladder rests on. It's before a single thought even begins. It's so clear. It takes so long to realize because we keep trying to approach it through thought, which is already going away. Yeats has a great line in one of his last poems. The Circus Animal's Desertion is the title. And it goes, I must lie down again, where all the ladders start, in the foul rag and bone shop of the heart. I must lie down again, where all the ladders start, in the foul rag and bone shop of the heart. Day and night are the illusion called birth and death, the council explained. Not until one is delivered from the conditions of this illusion can one experience reality. Every koan is an opportunity to shed the illusion called birth and death and experience minutely for a second actual reality. Not thoughts about reality, not clever stratagems suggesting reality, but to actually experience reality, the simple, concrete fact of reality. Roshi Kapleau would say, each time we are passed on a koan, it's like putting a pinprick in a sheet of paper. And eventually, with hundreds and hundreds of pinpricks, a lot more light comes in until eventually the whole center of the piece of paper falls out. And if we keep going beyond that, we discover there never was a piece of paper there to start with at all. But we start with tiny pinpricks through the piece of paper. This time, everyone was in agreement. At the request of some devoted Buddhists, Viceroy Chen issued traveling passes to me for my journey south. On the 10th day of the 3rd month, I arrived at Leizhou and stayed at an old temple located in the western part of the town. In a few weeks, I began to write my commentary on the Lankavatara Sutra. At that time, a year-long drought had produced a terrible famine. Here we go again, without social safety nets. All beings are vulnerable. And due to the people's weakened condition, an epidemic raged through the area, resulting in many deaths. As though sitting in a cemetery, I was surrounded by death. But the power of the Dharma shielded me from disease, and fortunately, I did not fall ill. Due to the drought, all the wells had dried up. Every night, my attendant Fu Shan would wait until midnight before going out to try to obtain a small can of water for the following day's use. Times were very hard, and water seemed as precious as ambrosia. We might be coming to those times again. There certainly have been many predictions that water will be the gold of the future, and that water rights will become one of the foundations of a great deal of potential violence as people fight for the very bases of survival, water. Corpses piled up everywhere. By autumn, when the epidemic had abated, I and a scholar named Ke Shi Fu organized the burial of about 1,000 victims. I then held a funeral service for the dead, while at the same time offering prayers for rain. The prayers were overwhelmingly answered. After a few hours after the service, it rained so heavily that the streets were soon 3 feet deep in water. The drought and the last vestiges of the epidemic were washed away. If you think that's just an old tale, I'll tell you something personally, something that Rose and I and our kids actually personally saw out in Santa Fe, maybe 30 years ago, 35 years ago. We used to spend a lot of time out there, and we would occasionally go to some of the Pueblo dances when they were still open to the public. if you came with good heart. They weren't tourist events. They were real ceremonials, genuine, very old. And so the Pueblos depended on rain for corn, of course, and one of the ways to get rain is to pray. So the dances are really prayers to put the universe in harmony and to make sure that living things have what they need, all beings. So it's a cloudless day in New Mexico. The sun is shining brightly. There's not a cloud in the sky. We go to the dances in these big plaza, and the community, lines of women, the drummers, rattles, tied on clothing. It's very beautiful. It's like almost like Tibetan kind of massive ceremony. And as the dance goes on, a couple of clouds start gathering in the sky, and dark clouds start gathering. After about an hour and a half or so, the sky just opened up and the rain poured down. Where our cars were all parked turned to a sea of mud, and we're running through this pouring rain in the mud. And I remember our kids who had been really skeptical. Our son was probably around 13 at the time, our daughter about 9 or so. They had been totally skeptical about this stuff. And they looked at us and went, "How did they do that?" So if you think prayers have no efficacy, think again. This is a very old human tradition for a reason. I can't say all prayers get answered, but certainly there's a ceremonial aspect that affects things. We're all connected. And as much as everything affects us, through a life of practice and clear-mindedness, we affect everything in ways that logic can never explain. I believe in that because of certain things I've seen and experienced. In any case, the prayers were overwhelmingly answered in this case. In the 8th month, by order of the prefecture, I returned to Guangzhou. Still under limited military supervision, I stayed in a barracks and while there composed some 20 poems about my experiences traveling with the army. While on the road to Guangzhou, I passed through Keiteng of the Dianbai district, which was considered the gateway to the country. This was my first visit to the area, and to commemorate it, I wrote a literary composition. I also helped to set up a station where travelers could get free tea. Tea was really the deal in China. It kept your eyes open, and it kept you able to continue walking when you were near exhaustion. Tea and Zen were closely aligned. And in fact, many of the monasteries grew tea, and there's a legend that tea leaves, tea bushes began when Bodhidharma, in a fit of rage at his own falling asleep during Zazen, cut off his eyelids, and they fell to the ground, became tea bushes. And ever since, Zen monks have drunk lots of tea. Well, if you're getting 3 or 4 hours of sleep a night, no more than that, and doing Zazen all the time, you might think that strong tea could be very, very helpful. And indeed, that seems to have been one of the things about tea, and it spread throughout Chinese culture and elsewhere. At Guangkai, I met Imperial Counselor Ding Wu, who, like me, had been victimized by the judicial system. False accusations had resulted in his being banished there. I had always admired him, and now that we had so much in common, we were able to become close friends. My 52nd year, 1597 to 8. If you look at the scroll, those who are here in person, the scroll that we have downstairs, thanks to Steve Slotto, one of our members in Texas, who connected us with a family business in Kyoto, who was selling scrolls. It was a 400-year-old scroll from exactly this period when he was 52 years old in the Ming Dynasty, which is of Daikaku, the god of wealth. In Zen, of course, real wealth is nothing at all. Leading a cow, like the ox, leading it peacefully. It's a neat scroll. It's 400 years old, and a few brushstrokes bring the whole thing to life. So if you're here in person, when you head down, take a look at it over the couch. It's really very, very lovely. In any case, that winter had brought much hardship to Guangzhou. Corpses and skeletal remains numbering in the thousands lay in the streets. Ding Yu Wu and I worked hard organizing burial details, and after the sad task was completed, we held a 7-day ceremony for the welfare of the dead. Our efforts were much appreciated, and many Cantonese converted to Buddhism. By the way, there's an interesting movie, what is the name of that? About a Japanese soldier who stays on in Burma. The Burmese Harp, thanks, Rose, yeah. Who stays on in Burma at the end of World War II. He takes on the guise of a Burmese Buddhist monk. He's just been a Japanese soldier. And he stays on to bury all the Japanese dead that have been left lying there when the Japanese, what's it called? Well, when the Japanese gave up, when they surrendered, yeah, thanks. When the Japanese surrendered and left. And the corpses of thousands of Japanese were left lying there. And he went around doing services for each one and burying them. And it's quite a moving film. It's called The Burmese Harp. It's also a book, I think Tuttle published the original story that the movie was based on. It's like this. He went around, he was just moved to it. He was a soldier. But by doing this, and by taking on the guise, the appearance of a Buddhist monk, he actually became a Buddhist monk in reality. He was transformed. It just arose in him, the need to take care of the dead who had just been abandoned. And it transformed him, and he became a monk indeed. Anyway, that summer, in the 4th month, I finished my commentary on the Lankavatara Sutra, but because some of my disciples didn't understand its main theme, I also wrote the Zhongyong directly explained, which enabled them to comprehend the sutra. So, skillful means at work. First he presented in a way that he really liked, and then he stepped down a couple of steps and explained it for those who didn't get what he was saying. So, persons convicted of crimes were not usually welcomed in polite society. Convicted priests were particularly despised. Remember, he's a convicted priest at this point. So generally, I was treated coldly or even shunned by most people. But it so happened that Viceroy Chen Ru-gong, who was so strict in his duty and stern in his manner that no one ever even dared to call upon him privately, frequently sent his men kindly to inquire about me. Melville has a great line in Moby Dick which simply goes, "Ah, the world, oh, the world. Ah, the world, oh, the world." He was treated so badly by the world, yet didn't change him. He stayed exactly who he was, doing exactly what he was there to do. Some people recognized that, and encouraged by this, Ding Yu Wu and I decided one day to pay him a visit. Naturally, we didn't get past the doorkeeper because they were, ex-cons, essentially. That evening, however, the Viceroy came by boat to visit me. He brought food and tea, and we sat and talked until midnight. His friendship towards me astonished everyone. Afterwards, he openly praised me to other officials, even claiming that I was the most accomplished master in the Sangha. To emphasize his support for me, he ordered various department heads to visit me, and in no time, the people of the entire Lingnan region, that's where the 6th patriarch had been, which is where really Zen took off, began to show me some respect. So I think we can fit in one more year, the 53rd year, 1598 to 9. That spring, in the first month, the administrator who'd been accused of fiscal irresponsibility in the matter of the Bao'an rebuilding plan was banished to Leiyang. He called on me in Guangzhou, where I was editing the manuscript of my commentary on the Lankavatara Sutra. When he asked about the scenery of Leiyang, I showed him my manuscript saying, "This is the scenery of Leiyang." He appreciated the view enough to immediately start soliciting donations for carving the wooden blocks to print it. Inspector Zhu Haimen, head of the Guangzhou Salt Tax Office, called on me frequently to ask about the Dharma. He was particularly interested in the history of the Six Patriarchs Monastery at Kaoji and asked me if I would revise the official Kaoji Annals. At that time, very little Buddhist theology was being taught in Guangdong. One day, Imperial Counselor Zhu Haiman, who taught Yang Ming metaphysics, brought his class to ask me about Buddhism. One of his students, Long Shen, was sufficiently impressed so that when he returned home, he repeated them, my teachings, to two of his friends, Wang On-shun and Feng Shen Chang. Later, the three of them returned to my residence and asked me to instruct them further. I taught them the transcendental doctrine, which they understood and accepted. The transcendental doctrine is non-duality, non-conceptual entrance into reality. The 10,000 things step in and are me. Moving the self forward to become one with the 10,000 things is called delusion, says Dogen. When the 10,000 things step in and are me, realize themselves as the self, this is intimacy or realization. They earnestly practiced Chan and were able to convert many others to Buddhism. Because of the efforts of these three disciples, the three treasures became well known in the area. That summer I set up a meditation hall, a zendo, in order that I might openly preach the Dharma, recalling Master Daguan's vow to recite the Lotus Sutra 100 times to reduce suffering. I decided to teach this sutra to the few dozen monks and disciples who gathered in the hall. When I came to the chapter on the precious stupa, I suddenly grasped the Buddha's meaning. The Pure Land of Buddhas existed before every man's eyes. The three transformations which were necessary to enter it were available to all, even to those of inferior ability. I then wrote a commentary entitled Applauding the Lotus Sutra. One more paragraph and we'll stop. My friend Ding Yu Wu had a quick and fiery nature, but he had a warm and generous heart. He showed respect towards the sutra even though he didn't know anything about the Dharma, but little by little I instructed him until one day, as he was boarding a boat, he realized the great awakening, cautioning him always to discriminate the truth. I gave him the name Upasaka, Ju Fei. I also wrote a poem as a reminder. And we'll stop here. It's a rather kind of lengthy poem, and we'll open with that for next time. The title of the poem is Purify Your Mind. So we'll stop here. I will turn the laptop around, and we'll make our own great vows, bodhisattva vows, for the benefit of all, before the Buddha and bodhisattvas.